Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. The purpose of this channel is education in regards to deconversion issues, atheist issues, and Bible and theology in relationship to those issues. As a former pastor, as somebody who has Bible and theological studies degrees, as well as a political science degree, I kind of look at things from those perspectives. So you're free to share my videos as much as you like. This is an educational channel. I have been asked by several people to comment on the current Supreme Court nominee, Amy. This is how bad I am. Yeah, Barrett, Amy Barrett. I wanted to make sure of her last name, Amy Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett, ACB, as she will be probably known for a while. Instead of ABC, it's ACB. Now, as an atheist, and as somebody who believes very much in, say, for instance, women's rights to choose, because as a libertarian, I simply don't believe that the government should be making the abortion issue their issue. I don't think it's their problem to deal with. I think it's a moral issue and a personal moral compass issue. So I stay out of that. A lot of people ask me to comment on the abortion issue, and my main thing is I don't possess a uterus, so I don't really have a say on the abortion issue. It's not my thing. Now, if some issue came and involved a man's penis, then I would tell women to mind their own business. It's not your issue. It's a man's issue. But that being said, Amy Barrett is causing quite a stir on the atheist and leftist side of the aisle for a lot of reasons, not just Roe v. Wade being overturned or some similar thing, but the Affordable Care Act. I have my own opinions on the Affordable Care Act as a libertarian too. I see it as a mass intrusion into the health industry with predictable results. When I look at this court nominee, there's a lot of things that I hear said. The first one is that Trump does not have the right to appoint this third person, and that is just simply not true. The Constitution does not make any statement in it about how many justices can be appointed by a single president in a given term for one simple reason. Number one, the amount of justices and all this stuff is actually set by Congress. There's really no clause in the Constitution other than the Supreme Court of the United States would be established to handle disputes involving the constitutionality of issues. That's pretty much it. But it's long been held that Congress holds the strings on how many justices there are, how the court will be made up, and so on and so forth, and how the process is laid out there. One of the classic cases in history of this was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, packing the court. Back then, the justices, I think it's in the 20s and 30s, there were 5 justices, and FDR ran into an immediate problem with a lot of his social welfare programs, in that they would hit the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would declare them unconstitutional on the grounds that in a lot of things that he was doing, he was seizing property from people. I know that I think his seizure of gold and other things ended because the Supreme Court pointed out to him, rightly in my opinion, that these are personal property and the government doesn't have the right to seize them, without due process. And seeing none of these people are being charged with a crime, you shouldn't be allowed to do this. So FDR had a lot of problems with the court because the court would shut down almost everything that he did. So he immediately called for Congress to give him 9 justices. And this was a big deal. Trust me, there are political cartoons about this going back and forth in the newspapers that are just hilarious. And what he did is, by giving him 4 more justices, he already knew he had 1 or 2 guys on his side for a lot of this stuff. But by giving 4 justices more, he now had 5 or 6. So he could get his things past the court without being declared unconstitutional. So this issue is not a new issue. When we're talking right now in the United States, everybody's talking about, well, if Trump gets this appointee and the Democrats, and Biden win, the Senate's already, if the Senate goes Democrat too, they're already talking about packing the court with 4 more justices to tilt it back 7-6. Now, personally, I think it just gets ridiculous at a certain point. You just got to understand that you win and lose political battles, and one of those results is that the court is going to reflect those wins and losses the most, because it's a lifetime appointment. And so that's why, there's like 3 days of grilling that Amy's going to have to endure, most of which is nothing more, in my opinion, than political grandstanding by both parties, talking about their pet recent legislative projects. And that has nothing to do with a Supreme Court justice, which is their job is to look at the Constitution and look at existing law and decide whether those existing laws are constitutional or not. They also spend a great deal of time defining what constitutional rights are and what the limits of those rights are. So that's really the only thing I'm concerned about when somebody gets into this position. So first of all, yeah, Trump has every right to do this. The rules of how many justices and how they're appointed and how many set by Congress, there's no limit on how many. The Constitution doesn't allow it. If there's a vacancy in the court, Trump recommends, the Senate approves, and they go on to become the justice. This is probably going to be a pretty slam dunk process for the Republicans. They have control of the Senate, and of course, Trump is going to get what he wants. So there's going to be, and now everybody's going, oh no, there's a 6-3 split. Well, there's a 5-4 split before. Okay. And you have to have a case, brought to the Supreme Court. A good example of this is actually my own home state, involving state constitution versus state law. Governor Whitmer justified her unilateral control of the state and her unilateral continuing of states of emergency without legislative approval under a 1945 law that allows for it. And this was probably passed during the latter days of World War II in case of a national crisis or whatever. And a lot of people were doom and glooming back then too. And so this law was never challenged as to its constitutionality because nobody bothered to use it. All of a sudden, she pulls it out and uses it, and the legislative did 2 things. First of all, they challenged her legality, or whether she was allowed to do that based on the Constitution. The normal procedure being that the Constitution trumps law, that the Constitution is the supreme law of a body, and the laws below that Constitution have to line up with it. If they have elements in them that contradict the Constitution, then those elements make that law unconstitutional. Somebody said, well, 1945, and it's like, yes, because it took that long for something to come up for it to be challenged. And the Michigan Supreme Court looked at both the legality of what Governor Whitmer did, and Governor Whitmer was shot down 7-0 that what she did was illegal. Okay, that's a vote that the media doesn't want to talk about, but that's the first vote, was that what her executive orders were illegal because they were not based on a properly called state of emergency according to the Constitution. I don't think they even referenced the 1945 law, other than they had a 4-3 vote that declared that law was unconstitutional in the first place. In other words, it was unconstitutional in 1945 when it was passed, but because nobody challenged it, it never was declared to be unconstitutional until very recently. This happens a lot, particularly at the federal level with the United States Supreme Court. You don't see the constitutionality of things being challenged until a law is passed that somebody says, hey, this is against federal constitutional statute. And then it goes out in front and eventually gets through the process of finding its way in the front of the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court says yes or no, this law is unconstitutional. It needs to be scrapped. It can't exist under the auspices of the United States. And that's a summary, and there's probably a lot more complication and a lot more steps to all that process. Bureaucracy gets involved and everything else, too. I often call bureaucracy the 4th branch of government, all that alphabet soup that both the legislature and the executive branch create. It's mind-boggling how many agencies there are and how much money they eat up every year. But I digress. But so If Roe v. Wade or prayer in schools, for instance, would have to be challenged, they would have to have a current modern case where it's challenged and be brought back before them. Probably what you would see in Roe v. Wade is that some states, they allow for abortion in their states, but because those states are heavily religiously influenced, the abortion clinic is like there's one abortion clinic in the whole state, and it's some weird place where it's very inaccessible, so people can't really get to it very easily. Other places other states make you jump through a ton of hoops before you can get one, none of which would be a problem. Probably what would happen is if some of that stuff was struck down earlier, these states would sue on the grounds of states' rights, and then they would bring the case back in front of it saying, listen, we don't want this in our state. We don't want abortion in our state, and we feel it's a violation of the state's rights. If that happens, then it's possible that Roe v. Wade could be overturned on the grounds of states' rights, and basically at that point it would be punted back into the state's preview, and each of the 50 states would have to decide their stand on abortion again, which is what happened before Roe v. Wade. Before Roe v. Wade, that was what was going on. I think in today's day and age, you might see 10 states go anti-abortion, mostly the deep Bible Belt South. But the rest of the country would probably pretty much stay that way. So I'm not sure it's a battle of Roe v. Wade there. I think you'd have to look at the makeup of each state and figure out a lot of people do believe in a woman's right to choose. And, Roe v. Wade being overturned is not as popular as it used to be. Other things like the Affordable Care Act, that's an issue of interstate commerce and whether that violates the interstate commerce law, because it depends on how you define healthcare. So there's a lot of things going on with this candidate. Now, the other thing that atheists are bringing up, and this is where me, the rabid atheist, is going to have a little bit different viewpoint than probably most everybody else. A lot of people are yelling at her because she's a Catholic. Now, I would remind all my atheist friends that one of the things that we're fighting for is that there's supposed to be no religious litmus test for somebody to hold office. Now, this goes back to the founding of the country, because one of the things the founding fathers wanted to get rid of was religious influence over politics. Okay, in particular, the English past they were leaving, they wanted to get rid of the same kind of thing that happened in England, where you have the king and you have parliament, and then you have the Anglican Church over here, and people had, there's no real separation of church and state. The king of England at the time, George III, and now Queen Elizabeth, have this distinction as head of the church. So they're not just the head of the secular government, they're also head of the church, which puts them in an interesting position. In the United States, that doesn't exist. It's not supposed to exist. Christian nationalists disagree with that and say, oh no, this was founded as a Christian nation. And once again, I will tell you, you need to pick up Andrew Seidel's book, The Founding Myth, and you need to read it because it's well documented and proves that this is not the case. The whole idea of Christian nationalism doesn't really appear until after World War II. And the reason the current older generation thinks that it's so is because they were brought up by their parents who kind of indoctrinated them that direction. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm against Christian nationalism, and I'm also against a lot of other things involving them getting involved in pushing their religion on other people. However, the fact that she's a Catholic does not disqualify her from this office. I am sorry, the religious litmus test thing goes the other way. You're not allowed to say somebody is disqualified from an office or position in government because of their religion either. Sorry, that's simply true, okay? Congress cannot make a law establishing religion, okay? You would be establishing all the other religions besides Catholicism if you said that she's disqualified because she's a Catholic. Now, this would also disqualify Biden and Kamala Harris from running for president. So you need to keep that in mind because both of them, I think, are Catholic. Now, me as an atheist, I'm going to tell you, to my atheist brothers and sisters out there, if the litmus test you don't want to apply to you because you don't have a faith, you also have to look at somebody who has faith and say, okay, their religion is irrelevant until they actually impose it on me. Then the religious imposition is the problem. Now, a lot of people think that she's going to impose, along with the other conservative justices, Christianity back in the United States. If that's happened, that's when to oppose it. That's when to get up in arms about it. Until it happens, you can't look at Amy Barrett and say she's a Catholic, therefore she's disqualified because she's a Catholic. That would be imposing a religious litmus test. There is to be no religious litmus test. Okay? None. That means you don't have to have a religion, or you can have whatever religion. It doesn't matter when it comes to a secular government. A secular government means that you don't even bother to look at a person's religion. You look at their qualifications. You look at how they view things. I mean, if you want to go after her based on how she views the Constitution or how she views certain issues and moral qualifications, that's fine. But you have to leave her religion out of it because you want them to leave your lack of religion out of it. And until we get to this state where people can say, you know, religious or not religious, are they qualified for the job? I've read her resume. She's qualified for the job. Okay. She's been doing very well in the hearings. All I've really seen in these hearings is a bunch of senators making asses out of themselves. And that goes for the jumping jackasses or the plundering pachyderms. It doesn't really matter. They both have been been asses as far as I'm concerned. They're using this as an opportunity to politically grandstand. And I find that distasteful. Their business at this moment is to interview Amy Barrett as her qualifications as whether she can serve as a Supreme Court justice. That's it. It's a lifetime appointment, so it's an important thing to consider. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad they're having 3 days of hearings and whatever else, and there'll probably be debate, and there'll be a vote sometime probably before the election. And, you know, because Trump has been kind of pushing that. So, and she'll probably be approved. And then the court will be 6-3. Well, in my opinion, 5-3 with one guy that kind of votes whatever he thinks sometimes. Sometimes he's right and sometimes he's wrong. But I don't know. My issue with this is, and this is the real issue I have with my atheist brothers and sisters, some of you have taken God out and put him over here. And you've reached over here and you grabbed government and you put government right back in that spot. And now you view with the same reverential awe government that you used to put to God. You believe some of the same horse hockey that you used to believe about your God, but now you believe that government can do that. It's all crap. I'm sorry. The only difference that I can see between God and government is I can actually prove government exists, and I can't prove God exists. Nobody can. But you can sure as hell prove government exists. But it's the same emotional, grabbing people by the emotions and getting them to go in by a herd instinct in a certain direction. It's the same having these dogmas, these platforms, these doctrines of right and left. It's the same labeling. It's the same tribalism. It's the same bullshit that religion has, only you transfer it to politics. And in my opinion, this is why I say that most political parties are religious. I just watched a video about why black Protestants vote Democrat almost all the time, and white conservative Christians vote Republican almost all the time. And the reason for that, you know, goes back to history. It goes back to whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you know, both of them have their major problems and major contradictions, but it doesn't matter that they're contradict within and internally. The reason that people still adhere to them is faith. They believe the Democrats will solve the problem. They believe the Republicans will solve the problem. If only we got the right president or the right Congress or the right person on the Supreme Court, it'll solve the problem. It's the same devotion to authority figures that I saw all the time among religious people towards their pastors and everybody else. And I'm going to say that it's the same, and it doesn't matter. It's all bullshit. Okay? Quit being loyal to people. Go out, develop some principles, and stick to them, regardless of whether they're popular or not. That's just true for anybody. I don't care if you're religious or not, but freaking develop some principles, some character, some virtues that you think are uncompromisable because they're right and true, because we as human beings have proven them right and true all the time, and stick with them. And if the Democrats are your party and they shift away from those principles, dump the Democrats. If the Republicans are your party because they uphold the principles you think are true and virtuous, and they start shifting away, dump them. Quit being loyal to the tribe and be loyal to your virtues, be loyal to your principles. This is why I'm a libertarian. Because libertarians don't demand anything out of me, in the sense that they don't sit there and say, you know, we're going to shift on this view or that. Their sole central thing is liberty and freedom for every individual. Okay? Yeah, maybe there's a little religious devotion, but I'd rather be devoted to a principle than a party and a leader and fall prey to the cult of personality. Because I'm going to tell you right now, in this country, Republicans and Democrats, you're all cult of personality followers. You're all part of a cult. If you're a diehard Democrat, you're a cult. You're in a cult. I don't care if you're an atheist, you're in a cult. If you're a diehard Republican, you're an atheist, you're in a cult. Because I now can say that when I look at the Republicans and the Democrats, they both have cult-like behavior. And if they were a religion, we wouldn't trust them. But somehow they're political parties and we trust them. And I'm going to tell you right now, Amy Barrett, she's fully qualified for the position. There can be no litmus test. So I'm not interested in what her religion is. I'm interested in her qualifications and whether she's going to do the job that she says she's going to do, which is to look at the Constitution and decide what is constitutional, regardless of what her religion is and regardless of what other viewpoints she have. Now, maybe that's your concern as somebody on the left. Go ahead, but answer that question. But don't sit there and harp about the fact she's a Catholic. She's not disqualified because she's a Catholic any more than you would be disqualified as an atheist if you were in her shoes. No religious litmus test cuts both ways. Just like freedom, separation of church and state cuts both ways. You want the state out of your business, and you want out of the religion's business, and you want religion out of the state's business. You want there to be a hard line. And sorry, that's just true. I don't know if anybody's going to like this video after I'm done, but there you go. I just want to thank you for sticking around for this one. It was a question asked to me. So, okay, here's Amy Barrett. One, Trump isn't wrong for doing 3 people. That's Ruth Bader Ginsburg expressing an opinion about what she thought to Barack Obama. She's wrong. And if she had been smarter, she would have said, you know what, I do need to step down now, because if the Republicans get elected, they're going to appoint somebody that's not going to be like me. And because of her dogged determinist view of sticking to this idea that no president should appoint more than 2 justices, freaking 8 years, a lot can happen in 8 years. Okay? It's why she is being replaced by a Republican president. And that's really her fault. Okay, she should have realized, hey, you know what, I'm getting up in years, I need to step down. I need to have somebody with the same ideology that I have press for a choice that more reflects my legacy. She didn't think that way. And that's why we're here today. It's not because of Trump. It's not because the Republicans are assholes. It's because some people didn't have the political foresight to realize what was going to probably happen. And that's kind of my opinion, my humble opinion. I want to thank you for stopping by, and hopefully someday I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.